Welcome, everybody, and I hope people on Zoom can hear me. I just want to say welcome, Venerable Ravina. Welcome, everyone.
That's right.
And I would like to start with the Mandala offering. So people on Zoom, you can see it over here.
Can I explain in simple terms what we're doing?
So Mandala offering is making an offering
There you
to
go.
to the Buddhas, to our teachers in this case, for you. So we're offering the
As a request for the teaching. It's like paying your ticket. Paying for your ticket, then you get the movie, you know.
Yeah.
That's what it's like.
So we're making offerings. So you can imagine we're offering the sun, the moon, the whole universe to the Buddhas, to the teachers. And in this case, to Venerable Ravina in order to receive the
To
teaching.
request, that's what they.
Yeah.
Yeah, Tibetan is very creative. It's a Tibetan style.
So we do the Tibetan chant since it's very beautiful. So please join in if you know the tune or if when you're learning it.
Okay.
Sanji Pyogi
Ruxing me tog tra mira lingji ni de gen padi sangye jingdu mikche urwari Rokunam dak jingla trepasho. Nam Guru Rajna Mandala Kam Nilyatayami.
So thank you so much, Venerable Ravina. I don't think you need more introductions. So
Okay.
I'll hand it over to you.
All right,
So
thank you.
Thank you so much for coming here all the way from New York.
Pleasure.
Appreciate that.
Hello, people on Zoom. Happy to see you all. Yeah. Good. Okay. We've got people here as well that you can't see them, but never mind. Put the screen around so you can just show the people so they can see each other. Well, they can see them at least. They're here too. Okay, there you go. Okay. So I think it's called, what do we call freedom through what? Freedom through knowledge, freedom through
Understanding.
understanding. That's an interesting concept, isn't it? I mean, well, first of all, why do we want freedom? Freedom from what? Then understanding what? So it's a bit of a mystery, really. So let's look. Well, it's very appropriate in the wisdom in the Buddhist from the Buddhist perspective, and it kind of might be surprising. Basically, Buddha's saying, one way you can put it, he's saying that we all suffer. There's suffering because we're living in la la land. We don't understand reality. We don't have wisdom, as he puts it. Therefore, we have ignorance. This is really the Buddha's view. So it's a bit surprising to think, who would have thought we suffer because we don't have wisdom? It sounds a bit odd, doesn't it? We suffer because they've got a crummy boyfriend or because the food was horrible or there's a war in somewhere, you know? So, I mean, that's typically how we think. So this view is kind of interesting. So the Buddha's essential point, and especially if we know who he is and where he comes from, this gives us a bit of a background. You know, it was like, I remember the Dalai Lama, I always quote this. He said that was these amazing Indians more than 3,000 years ago, actually, who were the ones who began the investigation into the nature of self. And of course, I crack a joke and say, we modern people, probably European style people, white style people, probably thought it was Mr. Freud 100 years ago. We're a bit behind. I'm not kidding, really, because when we understand these amazing Indians, you know, and then Buddha came out of that system, and then he actually diverged in his own direction, specifically in relation to his own experiential findings about the nature of self, and in fact, the nature of the universe. So in a way, Buddhism, not in a way, it is in fact, this kind of, it's got this vast body of knowledge coming back from those Indians, and then about 2,500 years ago, Buddha diverged in his own direction. And so now, of course, we have this Buddhism. And so these Indians, these geniuses, they're the ones who invented this skill, that's a psychological skill actually, that's called the accomplishment of which is an incredibly subtle level of concentration in the mind, and it's known as samadhi, concentration. And they've cultivated this technique that the world vaguely knows as, well, concentration meditation actually, and anything that's known as mindfulness is kind of roughly coming from this. what they did was that basically they developed this incredible skill that enables you to completely kind of go beyond the grosser level of our mind, all the kind of uncontrolled thoughts, even the sensory level. And they basically learned to access, they really probably discovered a subtler level of consciousness, a subtler level of mind that certainly in our modern psychological views and in our neuroscience, they do not posit such a thing as existing, you know. So of course, in our culture, we don't know much, but these days more and more, especially since the Dalai Lama has, I think, been in the modern world. And many, for the last 30, 40 years, actually, the Dalai Lama has kind of instigated these meetings between the best brains, the best scientists, and the Buddhists. And I think we in our culture are discovering this extraordinary knowledge coming from India, you know, more and more these days, I think. But basically, this technique, which of course Buddha took with him when he diverged in his own direction, is this incredibly sophisticated a skill that enables us, as I said, to access these more subtle levels of mind. So the whole Buddhist view of the mind, which we're going to talk about, is coming from the observations of these incredible genius yogi scholars 3,000 years ago, you know. And the interesting point about this, they basically, this subtle level of mind, I like to call it like you've accessed the microscope of your mind. These much subtler levels, like I said, we don't even posit as existing. But the crucial point here is we're not talking about the brain. We're talking about the Buddhist view of what the mind is, which is radically different. So as just background, as a bit of background, let's just say what the Buddhist view is of what the mind is and what he means by understanding, what he means by wisdom, and what he means by this ignorance, and why, how come this is why we suffer, you know. So, so he's talking about how we can free ourselves, liberate ourselves from suffering. And the job to be done is within the mind. The job is by the mind, within the mind, to radically reconfigure the mind itself. That's really the essential Buddhist approach, you know. What is the mind? So first of all, from the Buddhist perspective, it is not the brain, which is a big shock. Neuroscientists would laugh at us, you know, laugh at the Buddha. So without insulting neuroscientists, you could argue that the Buddhist view of the mind is that the brain really is a physical indicator. In fact, the body itself, the chemicals, the DNA, the genes, all the stuff that we know about so well in the modern world, these are basically for me, they're indicators of what is happening within the mind, which for the Buddhist view, and that's from their own observation, not some kind of thing they've made up, is not itself physical. This is a massive point, actually, you know. This is the first point. It's not physical. It's not but it intimately linked to the brain, inextricably linked, certainly at a grosser level. But the subtle levels of mind, which these genius Indians discovered before the Buddha, they're not linked to the brain. The brain, if you see a person who's achieved samadhi, you observe them, they would look like they were dead. They've gone beyond the grosser level completely, and not in a mystical hippy-trippy way, but in a very clear way. You know, this is like long term. Most of us won't accomplish that unless we give up sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and husbands and dogs, and go to the mountains for several years. It's got a pretty intense job to accomplish, but it's there, available to us. I mean, there are people like you and me right now accomplishing this samadhi, and it's an extant, living, real technique that's alive for now these 3,000 years. You know, so first of all, the mind is not physical. Second, the word mind and the word consciousness are broadly speaking used synonymously, you know, in Buddhism. Third, a major point, this is unique to the Buddhist view, I think, it's not something given to you by someone else. So if you're a Christian or a Muslim, you know, they talk about how God is your creator. God gives you this energy they call it a soul. Buddhism doesn't refer to a thing like that. The subtle levels of our mind, you could argue, are sort of similar to the idea of the soul, but quite different, you know. But basically, we're not made. There's no component of us that there's no part of us coming from a creator. Buddha does not assert a creator. That's the radical difference. But the other thing is, our mind is not given to us by our parents. Yes, our parents give us a brain, no problem. And this is a major point, and we're going to discuss this and the implication of this for your practice, that your mind is not, you're not the handiwork of someone else, basically. In other words, your brain comes from your mummy and daddy, your genes, your chemicals, your DNA, but not your love, not your compassion, not your anger, not your jealousy. So this is the next point about the mind. This word mind is used to refer to this whole spectrum of our inner being, inner experiences. You know, compassion, love, kindness, generosity, insanity, craziness, depression, jealousy, low self-esteem, you name it. All of this is mind or consciousness in Buddhism, but it's not coming from a creator, and it does not come from our parents. So then the next point, of course, is we don't begin in our mother's womb. If you want to find one thing in common between the materialist view and the Christian views, you began in your mother's womb, you know? But no, the Buddha, this is where the Buddha asserts that consciousness, and again, this is from his own direct experiential observation, not just some hippie-trippy idea made up, that your consciousness is like, they even use in Buddhist psychology the term mental continuum. It's like a river of mental moments. This moment of your consciousness inextricably linked to the previous, coming from the previous moment. And you can track it back in an unbroken chain of mental moments. Guess what? If you keep going back, right back to the first second of conception. So clearly the question is, what about the moment before conception? Where does your mind, where do you come from? Well, you know, from the time of conception, the egg and sperm come together, and your consciousness from before, because you track it back, you track the egg and sperm back to mummy and daddy, that's obvious. But the previous second before that, the consciousness, it was its own entity, and you track that back a few weeks before that to a previous body and a previous body and a previous life and a previous life. All this is in the Buddhist literature, detailed in great depth and breadth, you know. This is the Buddhist view, and this is the Hindu view as well. So this concept of reincarnation, it's described in great detail, and again, it's something we can eventually observe ourselves when we've accessed our mind at a subtler level through these techniques, you know. So your consciousness is not your brain, or it's not physical. It does not come from a creator. It does not come from your mommy and daddy. It just doesn't pop up out of nowhere, you know. I mean, you track it back. So sure, we track it back in our culture. You track it back to mummy, daddy, grandma, grandpa, and then the monkeys. And if you're a Christian, you track it back to God. But here, you track it back itself. It's got its own continuity, its own momentum, its own entity, its own thing. You know, so your mind is yours, and you basically bring your mind with you into this life, and its contents as well. We're going to discuss that. So, of course, the implication of this, before we even go further, is that what's in our mind, of course, it's impacted upon by our parents, by mummy, my baby, and all the things that have happened to us in our life. But our mind is our own. What's in there, we have put it there. This is a massive point, actually, experientially. And that this mind of ours is not set in stone, you know. And this is where the view of karma comes in. This idea of the continuity of consciousness is driven by this natural law of cause and effect, of karma, such that whatever we think and do and say is the process itself that kind of programs our mind, if you like. Buddha would have liked that phrase, and produces the person we become, basically. And equally, everything we experience moment by moment is the fruit of our past programming, put it that way. The Buddha uses the term of everything you think and do and say sows a seed in your mind that then eventually ripens in various ways in the future. So I remember the Dalai Lama saying one time, this law of karma is like self-creation, you know. And all of this, of course, in the Buddhist literature is dealt with in great depth. And particularly the tradition that, you know, that we are, some of us, educated in, the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. There's a tradition since Buddhism started there in the 7th century, came from India. There's this intensive monastic university system where they, you know, you can study this stuff for 20, 30 years. You don't just sit and meditate, but you learn the views, you learn this philosophy as part of the process of your own practice, you know. So it just stays at an intellectual level. Then you learn through experience in your own mind, through your meditation, to kind of verify this information. This is the idea. So basically the idea that the essential point that Buddha's making, his very first teaching, it's called the Four Noble Truths, or if you like, the Four Truths or the Four Facts for the noble ones, those who've realized this through their own experience. And basically Buddha here, he talks about, his reference point is suffering. He says there is suffering, the first one, and there are different levels of it. We'll discuss this. He says there are causes, pretty clear. Third, there is the possibility to be free of suffering and its causes. And 4 is the methodology. So really it's presenting Buddhist path, you know. Well, actually, there's a nice analogy in Buddhism. I use it a lot, as the bird needs 2 wings, wisdom wing and compassion wing. Well, this wisdom wing, this getting of knowledge, this quitting of ignorance, is one way of getting rid of suffering, is the wisdom wing, and that's you accomplishing your own marvelous potential to be free of all the rubbish and to be content and fulfilled, and the second wing, it enables you then to cultivate the second wing, which is the compassion wing, which is where you benefit others. You go out there and you benefit others on the basis of your having, you know, developed your own self. You can now help others do the same, help others be free from suffering. That's the compassion wing. So this is the wisdom wing we're discussing. That's the nuts and bolts of Buddha's teachings, you know. So, okay, so how is it that suffering is caused by our mind, which sounds very surprising. Our viewpoints, our approach, what's in our minds, very surprising to us. This is the absolute basis of all Buddhist practice. It's the job of learning to fundamentally reconfigure our own mind. So we're not discussing the brain here. I mean, it's interesting because, I remember one person in the 20th, he said that neuroplasticity, is the greatest find of the 20th century, meaning you can change your brain. I'm very happy we discovered it, But I mean, interestingly, the way you change your brain is by changing your thoughts. That's the process. By changing your thoughts. And that's really the key. That's really the Buddhist approach. You could even argue Buddha's a cognitive therapist, by becoming familiar with your thoughts through meditation, and then ever more subtle levels, unpacking and unraveling your own mind, identifying what is there very clearly at ever more subtle levels, and then learning to reconfigure these elaborate conceptual stories that are running us, This is really the Buddhist approach. He's a cognitive behavioral therapist. I'm not kidding. There's other terms now we use that I could say are also coming really the Buddhist approach very much. So what is suffering, and why, and how, and what are the causes? Well, at the simplest level, forgetting even about talking about karma and past lives, forget that one, but just observing in day-to-day life, the Buddhist model of the mind is very interesting. Is on the face of it seems quite simple, but it's very interesting that the psychological model of the mind, the contents of our mind. Basically, the Buddha divides all the thousands of thoughts and feelings and emotions, which we all know there's so much going on, all of that seeming chaos, what goes on in our head every day, all the things we hear about, the love, the hate, the compassion, the wisdom, the psychosis, all the names we give it in our culture. We can divide all of our states of mind into simply three categories. There are those that are neurotic, delusional, distressing, disturbing, that cause us right now to be miserable and cause us, therefore, to do dumb things in our lives and harm others. And therefore, all that processing, that programming then causes us our future suffering. Because what we think and do and say produces the person we become, which is the principle of karma, really. So then the second category of states of mind are really the positive ones. They're our saving grace. So the first lot, there's attachment, anger, jealousy, low self-esteem, arrogance, pride, all of these simple terms that Buddhist psychology would refer to, The second category, we know them very well. Love, compassion, wisdom, kindness, forgiveness, generosity. And as soon as we hear these words, we recognize, the first lot are miserable. We know that, whether they're inside you or whether you're on the receiving end of them. And the second lot, we know they're nice. If you say you're loving and compassionate and kind, or you say, oh, she's such a lovely, kind person, you don't go, oh, how horrible. Immediately we know, immediately we know these are the nice ones. It sounds kind of simplistic, but it's not, certainly this is the basis of the Buddhist understanding of the mind, the contents, the neurotic, miserable, and these are necessarily I-based. And this is not meant to be judgmental, it's just trying to explain them. They're totally, when we're caught up in attachment and anger and jealousy and the other ones, we're totally turned inwards, aren't we? We're completely separate from others. We're locked. We're sort of constricted, miserable, unhappy. It's clear. It is clear. That's how they make us feel, And the positive ones, it's the opposite, we can tell. So the third lot, we won't go into this so much. They often, in Buddhist psychology, refer to the negative states of mind or non-virtuous ones, that first lot. The second lot are the positive or virtuous. And of course, we don't like terms like this in modern psychology because it sounds a bit judgmental, but it's got very specific meaning in Buddhist psychology. And the third lot are therefore neither negative nor positive, which sounds a bit odd, but I like to call the third lot the mechanics of our mind. And so these are the states of mind we all know we need, like concentration, good memory, intention, attention, discrimination. These are all working overtime every second, enabling us to function properly. So whether you're a murderer or a meditator, you need good concentration. So we can see that these enable us to function, whether you're a horrible person or a nice person. So we'll leave those for now, but the other two, we need to look into these. And the crucial job is to begin to distinguish between these, because the basic idea the Buddha has is that the negative ones right now make us miserable. Right now, right this second, the very having of them is horrible. But also acting upon them, which we do with our mouth, with our bodies, harming others, all that sows seeds in our minds, programs our minds, that ripens in the future. Maybe we'll get into karma over the weekend for sure. We will. The second lot, and they're the miserable ones. Then the second lot, love, compassion, wisdom, kindness, acting upon they make our mind more expansive and more spacious. You could say happy. And therefore, when we act upon those, we are useful to others. It's certainly not surprising, you know. But the thing is this, we know attachment is, we're going to go into that one. We know anger is miserable. We know jealousy is horrible. We know anxiety, but they're awful. But our problem, I think, in our culture, and this is our psychology and our neuroscience, pretty much is, yes, I am angry, Rabina, but I'm allowed to be angry. Look at what my husband did. I'm allowed to be jealous. Look at what my mother did, you know. So we know that they're there, but because we're so caught up in believing the external event is the cause of what I'm feeling. And so to some degree, this is true. Your boyfriend hit you in the face. It's definitely true he hit you. But the shocking part that Buddhists, no, keep it more simple, get the boyfriend out of it. Even stubbing your toe, okay? Stubbing your toe, you stub your toe in the morning and you get angry, you know. So then you'll go, and you know, Ayla will say, well, why are you angry at me? And I said, well, I stubbed my toe. What do you think? So in other words, we assume when something goes wrong out there, when we assume the coffee's the wrong flavor and the red light is there and you stub your toe, we assume, therefore, of course, it's natural to be angry. So I am angry, yep, but that's the cause. The red light is the fault and the stubbing of the toe is the fault and the boyfriend is the fault. Well, the Buddha's saying, fine, it's not cool for these things to happen, but guess what? Even without being moralistic about it, guess what? You can change your mind. And this is a tough one for us. We think, what my mind? I'm allowed to be angry. He should do the changing. So that might be true, might not be true, but all the Buddha's saying, and I really do know, we know this is true, but we just don't like it. They say in Buddhism, if you can change something, I mean, please change it. But what if you can't? What choice have you got? You change your mind. And this is, we rage against this one because we think it's not fair. How dare? What do you mean I should change? Especially when bad things happen. It's therefore we assume you can't do it. We're sort of set in stone, and when bad things happen, you can do your best to struggle, but you can't really change. Well, Buddha's view is the mind is infinitely flexible, and this is the basis of all Buddhist psychology and all Buddhist philosophy, that the mind has this incredible potential to become a Buddha. This is a long term, okay? Don't hold your breath. So the etymology of that word really tells us very nicely what that potential is. The first syllable, da, Buddha, that implies, and this is what Buddha's found, been experienced, the total eradication from our mind of all the neuroses, all the fears, all the ego grasping, all the limitation, all the depression and the anxiety. This sounds pretty crazy to us because it just is not how we think in neuroscience. You know, you go to some neuroscientist and ask them, please give me methods to get rid of all anger, all jealousy, all depression. They'll think you're mentally ill, or you have to cut part of the brain out. Well, we tried that in the 1930s. They called it lobotomy, didn't they? They turned people into vegetables. So we're not discussing that. This is the way we have to sort of take this view, at least here, that your consciousness is not the physical. It's your cognitive subjective process itself. Of course, that's not easy to prove when you can't see it. If it's not physical, you can't see it. You can't see it with a microscope. But you can see it with the microscope of your own mind. You can identify it, you know. That's the Buddhist approach. So the first lot, the unhappy, negative, neurotic, I-based, fear-based ones, they're the source right now of misery. And then because of the way they function, which we'll go into, they then distort the external world. We know this, you know, when you're really angry with somebody, the person looks so horrible to you, you can't even bear to the face, you know. But if you're attached to somebody, we're going to go to attachment, things look delicious. So the Buddha's view very much too is that what goes on in our mind, this is surprising, what goes on in our mind determines how things appear to us. I think we can see that's true. I think to some degree we can see that's true. We know when you're angry, everything looks just too horrible for words. Absolutely, when you're depressed, you can't believe how horrible everything looks. But when you're happy, the whole world is completely shiny and bright, isn't it? We kind of know that, and that really should tell us already. It's quite profound, but we don't join the dots. We just sort of take it for granted. That is telling us exactly that it's the mind that plays the main role. I mean, we know that. You might hate chocolate cake, and I might adore chocolate cake. The same thing out there, two different people, two different views. This is really clear that the difference isn't the cake, it's the mind. It's kind of obvious, but because we're so addicted to believing the outside thing is the cause of our suffering and the cause of our happiness. I mean, we blame the cake for making us happy, basically, you know. But the whole point that the Buddha has found, and this is the Indians, the genius Hindus before him, they found this too, that the mind is an infinitely flexible thing and that we can learn to reconfigure what is there. And why would we want to? Because then we'll stop suffering. That's his point. That's the point. This is the meaning of this word nirvana, you know, not some place like heaven. The wisdom wing is really the accomplishment of your nirvana, the cessation of suffering and its causes. This is the idea. And then you got the compassion wing, add that to it, and then you become this Buddha, you know. So if it's true, you know, this long-term potential to develop our mind. Oh, I forgot the second part. The first part, you know, Bud implies the eradication of all the nonsense, which is a pretty shocking concept. I remember in one class, one talk, one woman just burst into laughter, and I don't blame her. She said, "This is completely absurd. What are you talking about? Get rid of all anger, all attachment, all jealousy, all depression. You sound like a mentally ill person." And I think this is really true because in our culture, we really do, and even us intuitively, I think, we take it as a given that these parts of our mind are the normal part of a normal person. And we give them equal status along with love, compassion, and wisdom and all the nice stuff. So, of course, we prefer to have a bit more of the nice stuff. We know that. But the idea that you can rid the mind utterly of this first lot, that's a bit extreme, you know. This is the Buddha's view. What he's found, what he's done himself. He's just telling us his methodology. So this, the da, the second syllable, that implies the development to perfection, literally, of all the goodness, the wisdom, the clarity, the kindness, to degrees that we would sound cosmic to us, you know. This is all in the Buddhist literature. It's all there, you know, one studies it when you study it more seriously. So that's the idea. That's the Buddhist view. That's the long-term result. So given that's the result, it's fairly evident, isn't it, that indicates this etymology, this view of this idea of ridding of the rubbish and getting full of the goodness. It already tells us, therefore, the methodology. We have to learn to distinguish between the neurotic bits and the nice bits, very simply. And that's a tough job. That's a really tough job, you know. So let's look at a few examples of this. So, okay, so let's then look into some of these unhappy states of mind, the neurotic, ridiculous ones, which we all know about, and the positive ones, and I think to see them together to show the difference between the way they function, you know. So let's just look at attachment and love as a classic kind of pair, you know. So to do that first, I've got to describe a bit more these negative ones. If anybody's read any Buddhist books at all, you're going to probably come across a term called the three poisons. It sounds very cute. The three toxic emotions. They talk about ignorance, attachment, and aversion. And they don't sound like nice words and doesn't seem like a direct relationship, but there's a very intimate and even a hierarchical relationship between these three states of mind from the Buddhist perspective. So this ignorance is really pointing to the most primordial of these neurotic states of mind that is the basis of all suffering. And that's really, broadly speaking, is kind of this primordial, concrete sense of a very powerful sense of a concrete, separate, bereft, cut off me. Is in its nature miserable, you know, and the consequence of it is a very powerful sense of separateness from others. So then the main voice of that, often colloquially they can call that ego grasping. We'll go into this, I think. Its main voice, and this is really essentially the day-to-day cause of why we suffer. And this is something really is surprising because it's not how we think in our culture, and it's not even a word we use in our culture for a problem. And this main voice of this ego grasping, the main voice of this sense of an isolated, unhappy I, is this attachment. Sometimes you'll see the word craving, but really attachment. So it's very different from how we use it. If you know, we in our culture will say, oh, she's really attached to her children. And that's a good thing because you're feeling close to people. But here, taking this very clear distinction between neurotic states of mind and positive ones. This is the key neurotic one. It's deeply instinctive, primordially deep, and it is underneath even all the others, and it drives. Even when we're doing nice things, it's there deeply in our bones, driving so much of our choices and so much of what we do and say and think. So this attachment is multifaceted, you know. Its first most primordial energy really is one of dissatisfaction. We're born with this, you know, coming from, Buddha would say, because of practicing attachment in the past. We come into this life with huge sense of, much more than others, and we can see it, powerful feeling of dissatisfaction. Whatever we get, it's not enough. Whatever we achieve, it's never enough. However we change ourselves and look this way or that way, it's never enough. Whatever we see, it's never enough. How much you tell me you love me, it's never enough. We can see this. We can see this, you know. This is the most energetic level of attachment, dissatisfaction. And then because you're dissatisfied, then obviously you've got this, you're hankering after what's missing. And this is the one that drives then this attachment, and it becomes like this emotional hunger. Because if I'm missing something, then I've got to search for something to fill it up, isn't it? So the obvious first level of this emotional hunger is for the objects of the senses, which is basically the entire world. People, things, objects of the five senses, you know. Some are much more powerful than others. Obviously, food is a much more powerful one than looking at pretty flowers, perhaps, you know. We all have this craving for something that's missing. And then one of the signs of this attachment is you think about the thing when it's not there. I mean, look at us, you know. It could be video games, it could be food, it could be bodies, it could be money, it could be handbags, it could be anything. It could be absolutely anything in the outside world. Depending on your habits, and that's due to karma, you glom onto this or that, you know. And then the next job of attachment is to manipulate to get it. And then the next job of attachment, this is its key function, is that it exaggerates the deliciousness of the object. And it exaggerates the power of that object to make you feel better, to fill up the gaping hole, to bring you happiness, you know, to be satisfied. I think we recognize that. This is primordial. Our mother did not have to teach us, you know. The Buddha says we come programmed with this. And this effectively, from the Four Noble Truths perspective, is the main cause of our suffering. It's underneath everything else, and it's driving us. And it's so automatic, so primordial, that we don't articulate it, you know. And of course, we take it for granted. It then causes us to possess, you know, to possess, that's mine, therefore to become greedy and all those things. And jealousy comes out of, strongly can come out of that one, all of that, you know, it's mine. We can see all this, you know, possessiveness, massive expectations. So fine, cake doesn't mind if you eat 7 pieces, but people do mind, you know. We start getting attached to people and manipulating and possessing. And of course, what attachment does is it causes us to stick our nose in everybody else's job. That's what attachment does. And so one way of saying what attachment is, and it sounds very cruel, but fits with this model of the mind, is it kind of causes us to be like a fragile child. Basically, this attachment, this emotional hunger, it can't stand anything that isn't nice. And what does it not mean nice? It means what I think is nice. So in a sense, it's totally self-centered. It's totally self-centered. Attachment is constantly wanting what I want every millisecond, you know. So the second it doesn't get what it wants, and I tell you that's 1,000 times a day, you stub your toe, the coffee doesn't taste nice, hubby's slurping his coffee again, the smallest thing, the red light, forget about the heavy duty things. The second that attachment doesn't get what it wants, which is all the time, then aversion arises. And aversion is the simple word for the basic state of mind that has this whole spectrum of response. Anger is the most volatile level of aversion. We all know people who, when the attachment doesn't get what he wants, to have a panic attack and shout and yell and scream. That's called anger, you know. Mild aversions of aversion, when attachment is thwarted. Irritation, frustrated, upset, annoyed. We say these words 1,000 times a day. They're mild anger, like a mild panic attack. Anxiety is a key example of that. Attachment is always worrying about not getting the thing that you want, worried it won't happen, worried about the thing that will happen that you don't want to happen. This is what anxiety is, and it's the interplay between this attachment and aversion. It's always distressing. It's never happy. These are never happy states of mind. Then the more subtle levels of aversion, for the quieter people, it built, when your attachment gets thwarted throughout the day, you suppress it, you deny it, and eventually one day you're inert in bed because you're so depressed, you can't move. That's the internalizing of anger, the internalizing of the buildup of aversion. So these things build up. They're not build up, because the Buddha's fundamental idea of the mind is that everything we see and hear and taste and touch and smell and do and think stays in our mind, is programmed, is kind of stored in our memory, So 1,000 times a day, your attachment won't get what it wants. You stub your toe, you get annoyed. The coffee isn't right, you get annoyed. Hubby slurps his coffee, you get annoyed. Red light, you get annoyed. It's just baby moments. Now, you don't go to your therapist, well, I got annoyed today. She'll tell you, shut up and wait till you want to kill your husband before you come. No, that's the problem. We wait till we have serious problems before we then try to do something about it. And that's our major problem in our culture, I think. We think, oh, annoyed, that's just normal human behavior. Yes, it is, but it's attachment not getting what it wants. And it builds up. It won't go away. It doesn't just disappear. We can see this. We talk about, the straw that breaks the camel's back. We know this, So the key thing from the Buddhist perspective is to learn to become conscious of this process, to become aware of it, to be internally conscious and ever more subtly conscious. Not just observing it, but then learning to be dynamic and to work with it, do something about it, be your own cognitive therapist, change these conceptual stories. And this is the key point from the Buddhist analysis, all these emotional, what we call emotions, are only because we call emotion because we don't notice the attachment and the aversion and think until it comes to the surface of the body. And that's when our body shakes. And then we realize, or until you're vomiting out the words. I mean, when I was a little girl, and even now my nature is very quick. So the millisecond my attachment didn't get what it wanted, out of my mouth came the words, But I didn't know I was angry until it came out my mouth. So you don't know you're depressed until you can't get out of bed one day, because we don't pay attention until the body feels it. And this is the key point. In our culture, we go on about feelings in the bodies if they're so kind of sublime, or they're the main thing. But the Buddhist view is our mind's working at a much subtler level, at a very subtle conceptual level, all these stories underneath, like the script inside our head. And that's why we've got to dig deeper to get down to begin to hear all those stories that then inform our emotions, This is Buddhist practice. It's not, don't call it religious. This is intensely psychological, direct, hard work, And the reason to do this is because you're a naughty girl, is because you're sick of suffering. And when you begin to even take the theory that your suffering doesn't mainly come from the boyfriend or the cake, and this is hard to hear, that it mainly is coming from your own conceptual stories, your own configuration of things. This is very hard to hear. This is very hard to hear because it doesn't appear like that. It appears that everything out there is the main cause, That's because we don't pay attention. So this is the essence of being a Buddhist, okay? You're going to have to ask me some questions now. Come on. That's chapter 1. Yes, good. Talk to me.
When conquered attachment.
What, sweetheart?
When you've conquered attachment.
When you'll be free of suffering, baby. You'll be blissfully happy. You'll be clear. You'll be in control. You'll give up anger. You will have given up jealousy. You will have given up anxiety. You would have given up low self-esteem. You'd be blissfully joyful. You'd be fulfilled. You'd know your mind well, and you'd be compassionate and loving. You'd be an amazing human being.
What happens to all the energy that comes?
What energy?
Like the energy of hatred.
Oh, it's all gone. It's disappeared. It's all gone. Gone. Disappeared. Disappeared like a puff of smoke. You've only got compassion and wisdom and clarity now. You've worked on it and unpacked and unraveled and slowly changed all the conceptual stories that inform the attachment and inform the anger. It's gone. Don't hold your breath. It's not going to happen in a few years unless you're a special person. It's all gone. It's not suppressed. It's literally, you've really done the deepest therapy, put it that way, and dug deep and gone in and go beyond it.
So it's dissipated.
Pardon?
Yeah,
Eventually,
energy,
totally.
yeah.
And then you don't you don't become some this boring person if you give up attachment and anger. You become much more joyful and vibrant and more realistic and more true and all these blah, 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 you know. This is the Buddhist approach to it. I mean, Buddha doesn't talk these words, but it's essentially putting it in our modern language. Do you understand? That's what he says our potential is. And then you'll enjoy things a billion times more. Have more pleasure, more joy, more happiness, more compassion, more wisdom. Oh, it sounds nice, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Talk to me, Lou.
Thank you,
Hello.
Robin, once
Hello,
again.
sweetheart. Talk to me. Happy to see you.
Um, can you see me?
I can see
Can
you,
you-
darling.
Yeah. How can we achieve enlightenment in one lifetime? In this very lifetime. I'm fed
I
up.
know. Okay, sweetheart. I know. You must have heard
I'm
that somewhere.
impatient, sorry.
Lou, you must have heard that somewhere. Okay, I understand. There are different levels of practice, as you know, different stages of practice. And the most sophisticated level of practice, the most advanced, are the techniques that would enable a person who is qualified to achieve Buddhahood in one lifetime. So they're all there they're all there, and that's the Vajrayana system, sweetheart. That's the Vajrayana practices, Lou.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
All right. So now having described a little bit attachment, now let's compare it with love and see why the problem is. And this is we can spend the whole weekend just on this and we would not get bored, I promise. So what's love then? So love in the Buddhist view is under the second category, a positive state of mind, an altruistic state of mind. And it's the bare bones of love is it's a delight in someone else's happiness, the wish that someone be happy. Basically, as simple as that. That's the meaning of love. But when we say I love someone, we mostly mean we're attached to them. And this is the way the world is. It's okay, you know, it's not as judgmental. It's just doing the analysis. So let's look, a way to look at this is very interesting. When we look at the compassion wing of how to cultivate these levels of compassion, which is more advanced, this is the first level. Got to sort yourself out first before you can help others. But there's a really nice way, a particular technique they call, or an approach called developing equanimity. So this is the beginning of the development of love and compassion. You know, so what equanimity here means is it's a very simple recognition that the person you label a friend, who is the person you're attached to, and the person you label an enemy, who is absolutely a person you are not attached to and you have aversion for. So you've attachment for the first one, and that means they appear divine to you, and they do what your attachment wants. That's called a friend. The enemy, we mightn't use that word, but that's the person who proactively probably doesn't do what my attachment wants and even does what my attachment doesn't want, for whom we have strong aversion. Enemy, you push them away. The third person and the third one is stranger. So what's a stranger? That's the person we have complete indifference to. And that's one of the functions of ignorance. These are the three poisons. So the object of attachment, the friend. The object of aversion, the enemy. The object of indifference, utter indifference, is the stranger. So what's that? Well, the stranger, by definition, is a person who neither helps you nor harms you. And that's frankly 99.99% of the universe. So how do we think about them? We couldn't care less. They could all drop dead. We know, it sounds brutal, but we know it's true. And this is the world. Monkeys and dogs and humans all function this way, because from the Buddha's analysis, we've all got the three poisons. This refers to animals as well. No difference. So obviously we have those we are attached to, who appear more divine to us, who we are close to, who we think about every day. That can be our boyfriend, our husband, our children, or whatever, you know, and that's a little group of people. And that means those we are attached to, who then appear through our attachment lenses as very delicious. And then, of course, in order to really qualify as a friend, they must also do what my attachment wants, you know. So they're the ones, so that's attachment. Now they're the ones, so we do have love in our world, but they're the only ones we have love for, aren't they? In other words, the only people we want to be happy, the only people we think about to wish they be happy, and even to make them happy, are those people, are our objects of our attachment. Our children, our husband, our poodle, you know, or whatever. We know that, and that's sort of so normal. It sounds a bit shocking to think any other way. Well, of course we do that. That's what the world does. Monkeys and dogs do it too. And so the enemy is a person you push away, who they might have been a friend once, but now they no longer do what your attachment wants, so they've gone into the enemy category. And you do not love them. There's no way you want them to be happy, not in general terms. And the stranger, you don't even think about them. You couldn't care less. So we somehow can see this is true. And it sounds a bit shocking that we should even suggest we could try and change this. But what this is the first one of the main techniques. It's the basis of the beginning of the developing of love and compassion for all sentient beings. The Buddha's approach is we can learn to have love and compassion for all beings, which is pretty intense. Because why would we want to do that? Well, the Buddha says it's because it's our potential. And so the key thing about equanimity is right now, the basis for wanting someone to be happy, that is to love them, is that they do what you want. It's really clear. So with this equanimity, what we're trying to do is shift that basis. The basis here for wanting people to be happy isn't that they make me happy, isn't that they fulfill my wishes, which is the way we are now, but is because they want to be happy. So the Buddha's approach here is, and it's a nice little meditation we can do, that basically we're trying to shift this view of ego that it's only the person who's kind to me that I would bother wanting to be happy. And the rest I couldn't care, or even, wish they'd suffer. Instead of that, the basis of this would be that everybody wants to be happy, and that this equanimity is kind of trying to get the heartfelt recognition that the friend, the enemy, and the stranger, from their point of view, get yourself out of the equation. From their point of view, they are equal in their wish to be happy. So the recognition that someone wants to be happy, from the Buddhist perspective, is the logical reason for us to want them to be happy. I mean, yourself, like especially your parents, your mother, you go off and become a lesbian or something, your poor Christian mum has a panic attack, Well, whatever makes you happy, darling, that's love. But we know the other kind, well, you're freaking out your poor mum because she doesn't realize it's her attachment, but she's so upset because you're not doing what her attachment wants. It's as simple as that. We know all this. We know this, especially with our parents, and if you're a parent yourself. So if you've got masses of attachment with somebody, you want to manipulate them to do what you want. It's just what attachment needs. Attachment can't cope with anything that doesn't suit your mind. We can see this. That's why people are so possessive and so manipulative. That's attachment. That's attachment. But if you allow your child to be, it might make you sad. I mean, my poor mother, she spent her life crying, When I ran away from home when I was 19 and gave up going to mass, she cried, When I became a hippie, she cried. Started smoking marijuana. Then I became a radical lefty and a communist, she cried. Then I became a lesbian. I mean, she really cried. Then I became a Buddhist, she really cried. But next day, she'd ring me up like as if nothing had happened. She was amazing, my mother. I can never get over her, really. Next day, as if nothing had happened, she was back on normal again with me, My other sister said she would be resentful for them for months if they'd left home or did something. But my mum, next day, she was fine. I couldn't believe it. That's showing that she loved me. Do you understand? You allow another person. See, that's the real identification of attachment. If you're freaked out because she did this and he did that, it's because you're just not doing what your attachment wants. It's as simple as that. We're too scared to admit it to be that. But that's why we get upset, because attachment can't stand problems. Attachment can't stand anything that I don't want, basically. So it takes courage. We can see that. I mean, that's why I think anybody, you live with partners, I don't know how you do it, frankly. It suits me to be a Buddhist nun, I promise you. I always used to joke as a little girl, and all the girls at school would say, what are you going to do when you grow up? They all want to be married, And I would try to not be too rude. I think, how could you possibly want to live in the same house as another person? Mainly because I want to do what I want all the time, Totally, I wanted freedom all my life. It can be a good quality, hopefully. But to all the time being, I don't know, attachment, anyway, I'm going off on the track here a bit. But attachment, wanting what I want, we can see it nakedly. And that's, of course, is why we suffer. It was obvious we suffered because of that. But we don't call it that. We think we make the person wrong. It's their fault. They did this and they did that, and they shouldn't do this and shouldn't do that, I think we can see this one. It's very clear. Attachment mixed with love pollutes the love. We do have love for others. We do want them to be happy. We try our best to be kind and good to our friends. But what pollutes it, what drags it down, is always this I-based, fear-based attachment, But because it's utterly normal, we can't even, in our psychology, in our neuroscience, there is no concept of getting rid of this attachment. We don't even identify it as a problem. We just think it's normal human behavior. So normal that you'd be abnormal if you didn't have it. That's why to hear that you can get rid of this is quite shocking, It's hard to even imagine it. So the first step is to even try to hear what it means. And then we all recognize, we mightn't call it attachment, but codependence, neediness, all these words, possessiveness, we know these words intimately. They're all a function of attachment, This emotional hunger. So the very first level of practice in ourselves is to try to see how that causes us so much pain. It's not meant to be moralistic, We can definitely see how it causes to harm others. But the first one is to identify how it causes me so much pain. Even just the most basic level of always being dissatisfied. This is something we can see so common in our culture. I remember the Dalai Lama hearing about the incredible low self-esteem, even self-loathing that we have in our culture, which is really this dissatisfaction. And he said he was so shocked and said, this is so sad, he said. And it's true. There's terrible dissatisfaction. We don't even just say, I don't have enough, but we have it at the level of I am not enough. This is the most pain. This is something we can, again, spend the whole weekend just talking about this. This is the function of attachment. Never satisfied. And it's sort of interesting because everybody's familiar with it. We all know, no matter what our body is, the wrong thing, it should be this, should be that, the wrong nose, the wrong ear, this one, that one, the left toe, never satisfied. Look in the mirror, all you do is see an ugly person. We can see this. We can see this dissatisfaction in us. This is the irony of the attachment, We're attached to ourselves, attached to our body, but we're never satisfied. What we achieve is never enough, When we have that in ourselves, that emotional hunger then dumps onto other people, and then we demand that they be the cause of giving me happiness, which means they must do what my attachment wants. But then also we're never satisfied. When you have this strong sense of low self-esteem, strong sense of dissatisfaction, no matter how much the other person tells you that they love you, it will not be enough. We know people this way. No matter what you say to them, they always think you don't like them. They always think you're being horrible. You don't really love me. And we know that is so painful. This is the suffering of attachment. This dissatisfaction, this emotional hunger, this neediness, this expectation, this possessiveness. It's so limiting. We can see it, So we do have love. We do have compassion. They are our saving grace. And so I think one of the first things, I know when I first heard the Buddhist teachings, this general idea in Buddhism that we're not set in stone, I mean, if it's taken us until the 20th century to discover that your brain, they're not stuck with the brain you're born with, I mean, that really shows our limitation. That's how we really believed. And even now when you hear in psychology with people, like someone's really, really been harmed and brutalized and victimized and really suffering, because people do harm each other, there's no question. But you hear very commonly that you can never really get rid of it. You can never really stop the suffering, stop the pain. Buddha would disagree totally with that. Our mind is infinitely flexible. We can change. I mean, it's slow, hard work, but to know it's possible, I think, is a good starting point. That was really encouraging when I heard it, So love, what's that? Love is the delight, virtuous states of mind, the positive ones, which we know about. They aren't neurotic. They aren't I-based. They're spacious. They're other-based. They're more, they are more prevailing in our lives, we know we're more expansive. If things are more appropriate, we get along better with people. We're kinder to people. People are kinder to us. We can see this. So the thought, and especially the Buddhist view about the mind, when they discuss in some of the more advanced techniques, they talk about how, and it's encouraging to hear this, because we're not discussing the brain, remember, we're discussing the actual cognitive subjective process itself, that basically at its core, in its essence, it's pure. By pure, they mean It's not set in stone and it's not tainted innately by the rubbish, But I think that's one of the things we really don't think about. When we are miserable in our lives, when bad things happen, when we do bad things, one of our greatest sufferings is we define ourselves, don't we, in terms of our badness. I am no good. I did this. I did that. That's what guilt is. Guilt destroys us, and that's guilt is just internalized anger, isn't it? I am bad. And then we dump it on other people. That's what anger is. You are bad, and we set. And it's, as far as we're concerned, we paint the whole person with that one brush. We know that. So these delusions. That's one of the terms they use in Buddhist psychology for attachment, anger, jealousy. All these, they're delusional states of mind. They cause us to not be in touch with reality, which is this whole point of freedom through understanding, through wisdom. So one of the key ways we suffer as a result of these unhappy states of mind is that we are disturbed and distressed. But the other way they cause us to suffer, which is harder to see, but let's look at it. We'll go over it in the weekend. Is that the degree to which I'm caught up in attachment, let's say, for the cake, something simple, or excited, anticipating, hungering after it, craving for it, unable to say no to it because it looks so delicious. It really looks, doesn't it, this delicious thing on that plate out there, such that when I get it, I'll get happy, and it's irresistible to us. That's the energy of attachment. So when you give up attachment, it doesn't mean you stop enjoying the cake. You'll actually enjoy it more, but you won't be driven by the neurosis, So attachment just exaggerates the deliciousness of the thing. When you're in love with somebody, they look like an angel to you. They look like divine. You can't see a single fault, which sounds virtuous, but it's not. It's like foolish. You can't see reality. When you're angry, it's really clear. When you're angry with somebody, all you see is ugliness, So they exaggerate. We know that. And you know yourself, when someone doesn't like you, they blame you for something, for one thing you did. They see the whole of you as horrible. We know how painful it is, So these neuroses, they exaggerate, they distort. And then, of course, we believe in that story, especially the story about ourselves, I'm this, I'm that, I'm no good, never stopping. We believe it. 27 people can tell us we're a nice person. We won't believe them. One person says you're a creep, we'll believe that person. It's it really shows the irony of ego, Go, darling.
You talking about this attachment and that you're never good enough. You say people are saying, oh no, you look in the mirror, you're ugly, you're fat, you're whatever,
Yeah.
What kind of things can we use then because obviously you talk about chocolate cake.
Yeah.
You can easily, I don't need the Prada handbag because, blah, 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 or I don't.
That's right.
But yeah, this kind of more personal thing, sorry, so I'm not making.
No, it's very hard.
Yeah.
I mean, first of all, here we all are. We're social beings, aren't we? Okay. Okay.
Sorry, I think what I'm trying to say is,
Go on.
you can solve that. I want that handbag with the impermanence kind of thing, and say, well,
Yes.
it's not going to make me happy because it might make me look great for 6 months. But
That's right.
But so that's a physical doable thing. But you see, this grasping attachment of wanting. Yeah, that
The person to love you.
And then, well, no matter how much they say they love me, that I'm never going to be good.
Yes,
So
that's right.
A different kind of.
It is it's the same principle, but it's much more profound and deeper because it's so the deep. Okay, that's it. Yeah, I know. So the cake is something you can crave, but cake plays no role. It just sits there like a dumb thing on the plate. But a person is not a dumb thing on the plate. It's a dynamic, so it's very hard to. But the principle is the same. So the attachment one, yeah, exactly. So one of the things about, I think, attachment, the first level of attachment is pretty much for the objects of the senses, like I said, But when it gets to people, it is also the object of the senses. If he's handsome, divine, or whatever it is you like, that's kind of exciting. But it's much more deep than that. So there's the deepest attachment, actually, the deepest emotional hunger is to be liked and seen and heard and validated and approved. It's pretty profound. That's the basis of so much of the attachment we have and the terrible pain that we experience. We are craving to be seen and heard. And that's not just with loved ones, that's with everybody we meet. We're always we talk about being self-conscious when we walk down the street. We're conscious of people. We want people to see us nice. We're craving all the time to be seen and heard as nice. And in fact, that attachment is so intense that we don't think we're valid unless we get it. That's the biggest suffering on the planet. And that's the basis of the suffering of attachment. I mean, you say attachment to sex for a while, it's divine when you meet a new person. But after a while, that fades. It's really the attachment to be seen and heard. And the greatest pain when someone gives us up, I think, I remember it, when you're given up by someone, they leave you, is that they stop approving of you. So that's why we think we're completely nothing, because someone has just stopped approving of me. It seems almost so corny, but it's really the deepest attachment of all. So as we work on that attachment, first of all, even in relation to cakes and things, what you're doing is really, like your question, when you it's like you're healing, in a sense, you're healing yourself. There's a nice phrase, and I don't know where I got it, in our culture, we say you're becoming your own person. So when you've got attachment, you're not your own person. You're totally demented. All you're wanting is you only, it's even since you're a little girl, you're wanting mummy's approval from the day you're born. You know, so if mummy smiles at you every day, then you feel it's good. You feel energized. But as soon as she doesn't approve of you, of course we develop a picture, I must be a creepy person. So, and because we rely upon mummy telling us we're nice. And of course, we're not going to get that all our lives. And so if we've got very strong attachment to that, no matter how much our mummy and daddy tell us they love us, it'll never be enough. And we'll blame our parents for not loving us enough. We know some people had really quite nice mummies and daddies, but the child is always dissatisfied, you know, whereas somebody else can have a mean mother, but because they're more content in themselves, they don't suffer so badly. It's because of this need to be approved of. It sounds so, it's primordially deep. It's the deepest attachment of all that eventually goes when you really quit it. It's like then you'll be incredibly connected to others. You won't have that separate sense of a miserable little me all the time. This is our deepest one, and it's the source of so much pain, not just with our boyfriends, with everybody, with our sisters, our mother, people at school, people on the street. And loneliness is one of the main consequences of this. You think about what loneliness is, you know? Loneliness is you've got no one to share your thoughts with, to share your activities with, basically, isn't it? Would you agree? Well, we've got to ask ourselves the question, what is it about my thoughts that aren't enough until you hear them? It's quite schizophrenic, really, but that's how we are. We don't even know what we think ourselves. It's not meaning we shouldn't have friends. We need friends. We need to be loved by our mothers and fed and emotionally fed. There's no question. But eventually we've got to do it for ourselves, you know. Do you understand? So it's a difficult one, but it's all.
I asked a deep question.
You did, but it's perfect. Yeah.
Thank you. I think what you said there about this primordial issue is like, I was once watching a documentary of where a baby monkey actually depended on being liked, not just by the mother,
by everybody,
by the whole tribe.
There you go. It's evident.
And it's so deeply embedded.
Yeah, that's right.
So, and that's where we came from.
That's exactly right. That's it.
Problem is we're still chasing that, and we're not necessarily detaching ourselves.
Well, that's the point, and we can see it in everybody. You see it among animals. It's just, you know, when you're the low one, because people reject you, like you see it in the wild, in the shows, and you get rejected. You become like you loathe yourself. You've got no dignity. You think you're worthless because you're not liked by others. This is so sort of obvious. This is the deepest way our attachment works. So as we heal that attachment, as we start to practice, as the Buddhist approach and using any kind of method to become familiar with this, then you slowly learn to. I mean, the key to success in any of this is becoming deeply familiar with our own thoughts every moment. That's really tough job. We don't do that, you know. We only notice what's going on when it comes out the mouth or when you're depressed. But we mostly just go by, default, just chatting away and leading our lives. So this is what why meditation is so important. It's the beginning to become familiar with what the hell is going on inside our minds, you know. And it really does take time. And then then not just to see what's going on, but to then change what's in our mind, to change all these old ancient conceptual stories in our head, you know, the script in our head. It's a long-term job, as simple as that. And we're all familiar with this. I mean, you've got any decent therapist, decent psychological models, we recognize all this. Well, this is Buddhism. I'm saying in my language, our common words, this is totally from Buddha of 2,500 years ago. It's exactly Buddhism. Do you understand what I'm saying? So we can see how it's so universal. And so much of our therapy these days talk like this. So I think Buddhism has affected that in so many ways, you know. Do you understand? Over the centuries. It's very interesting. Yeah.
As you do the work and you uncover and you get deeper and so on, do you, in your experience, find that the work gets easier because?
Oh, no question.
Oh.
If it doesn't, you're not doing it properly.
Okay.
No question.
It's not
But
like
it's
you uncover more buckets.
no, I mean,
deeper
okay, in the
buckets.
beginning, it's very interesting. I know in one of the classical texts of Mabongko Rinpoche, one of our texts from the 1920s, some Tibetan Lama. When you start to learn seriously this meditation technique called single pointed concentration, these Hindus invented 3,000 years ago, okay? And it's usually in the text described in 9 stages. And most of us won't do this. You've got to go to the mountains to do this seriously, full on, really. You give up sex, drugs, rock and roll, and everything else to really do it seriously. You can practice it every day, but to do it seriously, to get the result of this single pointedness, which is a much subtler level of mind, you need to be in a very isolated environment. And most of us won't do that. So the thing is, though, they describe this technique in terms of 9 stages, sort of like little kind of, road, like on a road maps, like, signposts. And he said the sign of success at the first of the 9 stages is you think your mind's getting worse. And we can see that as soon as you do any therapy, even, you think, oh my God, what a shit I am. I can't believe my garbage, because you're starting to unpack what the hell is there, which we spend our lives hiding from me and everyone else, So any work we do that looks inside, it looms large, but that's a good sign. It's a good sign. And that really means we have to have courage. I think one of the biggest misconceptions about Buddhist meditation is that it's to make the pain go away, to make the thoughts go away. Well, that's just being nihilistic. It's ridiculous. In a sense, when you're starting, even a simple, we'll do this weekend, like a simple technique of concentration where you take your breath, just the sensation coming out. It's easy just to get hold of that as an easy object to focus on. And you're training yourself basically to stay on one thing. Well, our mind won't stay on one thing. It goes all over the place, but you're training. And so inevitably what happens is, even if you can do it a little bit, inevitably we think the job is to make the thoughts all go away, so we get freaked out. But no, in a sense, your thoughts are going to be more vivid to you, because you're not just mindlessly chatting away to yourself. When you're focusing on this thing there, the breath, you can't help but hear the thoughts. And that's where you start to think you're going more crazy. But you're not. They've always been there. And we should be happy to see them, because that's who we are. That's what's there. We'll start dealing with the weeds, and be glad to get out. One of my friends, a therapist, she said it's like putting your hands in your own shit. We've got to be happy to do that. Not, I wish it would all go away. Because also the trouble is, too, at the moment we identify ourselves with the shit. I'm bad, I'm this, I'm that. No, they don't define us. The Buddha's view is very clear. The Buddha's analysis, we should look at it. They don't define who we are. They're there, they cause pain, but they're not at the core of our being. And that should give us real courage. And they have logical reasons in their psychology of why this is, which we can learn slowly, But I think that's the key thing for all of us. We've got rubbish. We've all got pride and depression and jealousy. We know it's painful. But one of the major steps is to stop identifying this is me, and try to identify ourselves in terms of our wisdom and our clarity and our kindness and our effort to be a better person. We should remember that, but we forget. I mean, all the chatting in the head, people never say, oh, I can't stop thinking good thoughts. I don't mean anyone who says that. Do you understand? It's very funny, isn't it? We've got to unpack all this for the weekend. Wow. So just a little prayer that's really just saying, may compassion grow and grow in the hearts of all. Very short. Changchob semchog rinpoche ma ke panam ke gyochig ke pa nyampa me payang gong ne gondu habashok. That's it. Okay, people. Thank you. Thank you.